With President Trump. This is the USMCA whip team, and what we've been talking about is how to get USMCA passed through Congress. And this has been an effort that's been going on for months from the president and his trade team renegotiating what is currently NAFTA, what's ultimately going to be a better deal for America with a trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. The president's team has been meeting with Democrats and Republicans. You saw Ambassador Lighthizer a few weeks ago go and present the USMCA agreement to the entire Democrat conference, and he and his team have been meeting with Democrat leaders as well as Republican leaders, and we've been talking with our whip team to Democrats who are already supportive and want to see this get passed across the finish line. And the reason we want to get USMCA passed is because this is a much better deal for America, and especially for American workers, whether it's agriculture, whether it's financial services, better intellectual property protections. There are a lot of big wins for American workers in this agreement. We'd like to see it move through Congress as fast as possible and create even more jobs with this growing economy. With that, I want to turn it over to the Republican leader of the Ways and Means Committee, Kevin Brady.
Thank you. Thank you, Whip Scalise. We need more customers in America. As you know, we both want to buy American and sell American all throughout the world, and Mexico and Canada are key markets for our agriculture, for our energy, for our manufacturing, and for our technology. President Trump got elected saying he would renegotiate trade agreements to make them fair for the American people. With the U.S. and Mexico-Canada agreement, that's exactly what he's delivered. This is an area where Republicans and Democrats together can agree that this is a better trade agreement for America. It's modern, it's updated, it creates new markets and new customers for our workers, for our families, and for our local businesses. We need to work together, Republicans and Democrats, to pass this agreement and get it to the president's desk this summer. Looking carefully at the agreement, there's really no reason not to support this and get it to the president's desk. With that, I would like to introduce Vern Buchanan, who is the Republican leader of the Trade Subcommittee. Vern?
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. I mentioned to the president, I appreciate, I've been here about 10 or 12 years, but him getting engaged in a lot of these different trade agreements or trade possibilities around the world, but we're focused primarily today on USMCA. It's about $1.3 trillion. I don't like using that term back in 2008, but too big to fail when you think about it. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jobs. I know in Florida, my state of Florida, 1 in 5 jobs is trade related. We have 14 ports, but this makes a big difference, not just to our state, but all the way across the country. If you look at the new and improved version of NAFTA 2.0 or whatever, I think there's a lot of wins in there for us in terms of the United States, and I think they've done okay, but I think it's a great bill. And our team here today, we're all working together to make sure we can get the votes. We believe we can. We're very optimistic with the president's leadership, and we hope to get it done sometime before August.
So how are you going to create... One more. We have Catherine McMorris-Rogers, former conference chair. Yes, we will. Yeah.
I, too, just want to say it was great to be able to spend some time with the president to be talking about how we're going to get the USMCA trade agreement passed and signed into law this year. Obviously, this has been a big priority for the president, for the administration. They've done great work, working bipartisan with Republicans and Democrats. I come from Washington State. We're the most trade-dependent state in the country, and we want to sell more airplanes, more Microsoft products and other tech products. Agriculture is our #1 industry. This is so important to Washington State. It's important to America. It's important to our farmers, to our manufacturers, to our workers. These are jobs. These are American jobs, and getting this trade agreement done is a high priority for us this Congress.
All right, we'll be happy to take questions.
Yeah. So can you tell us how you're going to create the markets? And B, can you tell us, is Mexico going to step up and pay for any part of the wall since the veto override failed in the House today? That's going to happen. So can you tell us, have you negotiated that with Mexico and any way, shape, or form.
So our relationship with Mexico and Canada is stronger when we're all three growing. This trade agreement does exactly that. It combines the strengths of these North American countries, allows us to access customers in these other countries, and just as importantly, not only are we able to sell more made in America products to those customers in Mexico and Canada, but by partnering with them, we're more competitive around the world. So American businesses, manufacturers, tech companies can compete and win anywhere in the world, including here in North America. That's why passage of this agreement is so important.
And as for the wall,
If I may, yes, sir.
but could you answer that? I did ask that.
First of all, we're building wall right now, and we've appropriated money that the president's been moving forward on to secure America's border.
Did any of the lawmakers press the president on the Section 232 tariffs with Canada and Mexico about the prospect of removing those before Congress would take up this agreement?
Well, first of all, there have been a lot of negotiations between Mexico and the United States and Canada on the timing of how to get this moved through. We all want to get this moved through our respective legislative bodies as quickly as possible. And so, let the president continue to lead the negotiations, and he's done a great job with his team from Ambassador Lighthizer on down to answer questions that anybody's had, whether it's members of Congress. Obviously in Canada, we've had a lot of negotiations. They've got their own legislative process that they've got to work through in the House of Commons.
Can this agreement still get through, though, if those tariffs are in place?
Well, you're seeing the tariffs, I think, help create more leverage to get a deal done. Everybody wants to get this done. Canada wants to get this done. Mexico wants to get this done. We want to get this done. So let's just focus on moving it through as quickly as possible.
Congressman, obviously you're here to talk trade, but healthcare is another big issue today for the president, for you, for Democrats. You obviously support the repeal and replacement of the Affordable Care Act, but people like pre-existing conditions. You know that. People like elements of Obamacare. Why push to repeal it when there's no clear plan to replace? And how are you not politically on shaky ground?
Well, let's first be clear. Obamacare has failed the American people. If you look at healthcare costs, they've been rising dramatically for everybody, including people with pre-existing conditions who in many cases are seeing double-digit increases every single year. Some people have $10,000 deductibles, which makes health care unaffordable to them. What we want to do is, and the president said this before himself, we want to, number one, protect people with pre-existing condition. We strongly support that. While we also want to lower premiums. This is the big difference between Republicans and Democrats in Washington. We want a health care plan where families can choose the doctor of their choice from wherever they want to buy a policy. If they want to buy lower premiums from a plan in another state, that ought to be their choice, not Washington bureaucrats' choice. We want to protect people with pre-existing conditions and see lower premiums. Under Obamacare, what we've seen is dramatically higher premiums, so the law's failed people. Ultimately, the courts will decide whether or not it's constitutional. But if it's unconstitutional, we still want to put a system in place that protects people with pre-existing conditions and lowers premiums, which is a big difference we have with Democrats.
Democrats see this as a winning issue, and they point to the midterms as proof of that. Aren't they right?
Well, first of all, we support protections of people with pre-existing conditions while focusing on lowering premiums. The big difference we have between Republicans and Democrats right now on a lot of issues, from health care to energy policy to immigration policy, we want people to have more freedom to choose the things that are best for them and their families. Democrats under Pelosi want more government control. So it's freedom versus Washington control over things in their lives. Let families choose. By the way, the people that told you if you like what you have, you can keep it, remember how millions of people lost the plans that they liked and had. So they were misled. They were misled by a lot of things. They were misled about collusion with Russia. So the same people that have been misleading on all those other issues want to try to mislead people on health care costs. Those are the same people that promised your costs would go down. People have seen their costs go up. Let's focus on lowering premiums and giving people more control over their life. They know what to do better than Washington.
When you talked about Canada,
Right over here.
Would you support a quick fix if the law is struck down, $1 mandate, repealing the individual mandate, just a fix to avoid the chaos if the law is struck down?
Well, again, we focused many times on protecting people with pre-existing conditions, lowering premiums. You haven't seen Democrats being willing to work with us to actually lower health care costs for families, to actually allow families to choose the plan that's best for them, not that's best for Washington. So ultimately, it's about Washington control versus individual freedom. I sign with individual freedom. I sign with.
If the Department of Justice, we know what they're doing right now, obviously. So if the courts concur and they say that the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, is unconstitutional, for the 28 million people who benefit by the Medicaid expansion or get their health insurance through the exchanges, what happens to them the next day?
Well, first of all, you're presuming that the courts are going to do some things. The courts ultimately can do a lot of things with this. The courts can have a phase-out plan of their own. Ultimately, what we would like to see is have families not only have better choices for health care, but have lower premiums and protect people with pre-existing conditions. We've strongly supported those principles. We've actually passed bills to support those principles, and the president's advocated for that as well. Democrats, by the way, have opposed a lot of those measures that let families choose their own health care plans, that focus on lowering health care premiums. They want government control. They don't stop, by the way, at single payer. Now they're talking about Medicare for all. And let's be very clear about what Nancy Pelosi is pushing in the House with Medicare for all. She wants to put about 200 million more people on Medicare, which has already got its own financial problems that we want to fix. We want to save Medicare from bankruptcy. They want to put 200 million people more on it. And under the Democrats' plan, they actually end the health insurance programs that go through a lot of companies. Many Americans, millions of Americans, get their health care plans through their employer, and they like those plans, by the way. They're very good health care plans. Under Speaker Pelosi's agenda with Medicare for all, they get rid of the healthcare marketplace that millions of Americans get their health care from.
To be clear, though, for those 28 million who do benefit by it, what happens to them the next day? Were you advocating for a phase-out, or what do we say to them who are hearing the news today and thinking, what happens to me tomorrow?
Well, first of all, it hasn't ended for anybody today. What is happening for families today is that they're seeing double-digit increases, in many cases, in their health care premiums. Many of them are seeing unaffordable health care because, again, when you have a $10,000 deductible, for a lot of families, that's a direct impediment to being able to access health care. We've said let's focus on lowering premiums and putting families in charge of their health care.
Do you agree with Leader McCarthy that Adam Schiff should step down as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee?
Well, I think he's lost his credibility. When Adam Schiff has gone before the country for the last 2 years and said that he had more than circumstantial evidence that there was collusion, and there was no collusion. He owes an accounting to the American people that he's been misleading for these last 2 years. So have, by the way, all of those other Democrat leaders, many of them committee chairmen today, that have misled the American people. There was no collusion. We looked into that, by the way, when we were in the majority, and it didn't take us two years. It didn't take us over $20 million of taxpayer money. We realized quickly there was no collusion, and then we moved on and focused on things like lowering taxes for working families so we can bring middle-class jobs back to this country. All of those Democrat leaders who were out there in the press for the last 2 years making the most outlandish claims you could make, all the way up to the highest levels in government, they owe an accounting and frankly, an apology to the American people for the misleading people.
Which other chairmen are you calling to for the resignation?
You can run the video. I'll get the video to you if you want, of all of those people who have made some of the most outlandish claims about the president, about his family, and by the way, some of them haven't gotten over it. They still want to continue going after the president and his family, even though the facts don't justify what they're going after. They ought to be focusing on the things we're focusing on, and that is creating more American jobs, getting our economy back on track, keeping the focus on solving problems for everyday families, and lowering health care premiums, by the way, too.
Yeah.
What is your time?
We actually have a trade question. Will you have it to take?
What is your timetable for getting USMCA passed? And during your meeting today, did Ambassador Lighthizer give you any updates about the trade talks with China as well?
So on the timing, as Ambassador Lighthizer has said, the legislation will be sent to the Hill when Speaker Pelosi gives the green light to do that. Ambassador Lighthizer and those of us here today are continuing to work with Democrats to address any enforcement issues or any other fine-tuning they'd like to see on this agreement. But we think it's crucial, and our farmers and our manufacturers and tech companies tell us it's crucial that we come together and pass this new agreement and get it to the president's desk this summer.
Thank you all for coming out, and we look forward to getting USMCA passed. Thank you.